The accepted storyline on the rise, decline, and fall of Atlantic piracy is a tale of civilization taming a wild frontier. National governments use this narrative to explain and defend their efforts to extend their reach and enforce their authority on their frontiers, on both land and sea. In these efforts, national governments articulated and upheld the differences between legitimate and illegitimate authority and force. For example, in the mid and late 19th century, the great powers discontinued privateering, drawing a sharp moral distinction between the force employed by government vessels and the violence applied by private vessels and the rogue regimes that commissioned them. Okay. We're all a product of this narrative because we were all born after this project has already been completed. Okay. Our national governments have established their reach and authority and enforcement throughout their territories, all the way from the national capital to the border. To a lesser degree, national governments have even extended their reach into the sea. Okay. It's not coincidental, then, that our own modern image of the sea as a territory governed by laws was shaped in an age of the internal combustion engine, when steam and diesel technology really did make navies more effective at blockading coastlines and patrolling the sea against interlopers and illegal traders. So naturally, given the state's greater capabilities and competence at sea, the idea of state jurisdiction at sea went from being a completely theoretical and legally dubious concept to a confused but established and accepted legal doctrine. Okay? So fundamentally, the legitimacy that the state and statutory law enjoy in the hearts and minds of modern constituents is born by first-hand experience that the state actually does have the practical ability to monopolize violence, to disarm non-state actors, to make certain activities illegal and illegitimate, and to enforce unpopular statutes from border to border, and even at sea. Governments did not enjoy this kind of credibility and legitimacy in the 18th century because they repeatedly demonstrated to constituents, through their failure to curb piracy and illegal trade, for example, that they did not have the capacity to exert real power locally. So the law, the statutory law as a form of propaganda, remained unconvincing then. Okay? The state's monopoly on violence at sea was articulated in statutory law at the time, just as it is today. But it was not accepted as legitimate, nor as a practical reality in peripheral communities. That gap between the written law and the habits and practices and values of the population is something that we moderns can easily miss. Yeah. I once read an observation about Lord Acton's famous aphorism that power corrupts. And certainly Acton was saying that wielding power over others encourages moral weakness in a ruler. But his central point was that power tends to corrupt the observer of the powerful, most specifically the historian. And it strikes me as a useful reminder on this issue of state authority and legitimacy. Because we moderns, historians included, we've been living within the modern nation state for roughly 150 years now. We're born into it, we live in it, we educate our children and students in it, and then our children and students do the same, and so on. Okay? And we observe tremendous administrative power wielded by our government bureaucracies in virtually every facet of our lives, and literally every single day of our lives. So it's natural for us to see the symbols and language and assumptions of state power as credible. So when we see state power and authority articulated in 18th century anti-piracy statutes, Our own experience of observing state power in our daily lives makes us credulous, and it obscures from us the credibility gap that contemporaries experienced between law and custom then. Thank you for participating in this class. I enjoyed reading your work and your emails. I hope you enjoyed the class as well. And good luck on the exam, and enjoy the break.